What if what you thought was impossible was simply unrecorded in your history books? What if the most astounding events of the medieval period, from the 10th to the 15th centuries, happened not on battlefields or in royal courts, but within the quiet walls of convents, witnessed by devout women? Number 10. The unblemished habit of Sister Philippa. Deep within the stony heart of a Benedictine convent, established in the early 11th century in the rolling hills of what is now northern France, lived a nun named Sister Philippa. Her life, by all accounts, found in the convent's meticulously kept chronicles and the scattered letters of visiting clergy, was one of quiet devotion, diligent work, and unwavering humility. She arrived at the convent as a young novice, barely old enough to understand the full weight of her vows. Yet she embraced her new existence with a spirit that seemed to defy her youthful years. From the moment she took her final vows and received her black habit, a plain, rough-spun garment of wool designed to signify her separation from the worldly adornments, an unusual phenomenon began to manifest around her. The Benedictine habit, like all monastic attire of the period, was not made for luxury. It was practical, durable, and intended to endure years of wear, tear, and countless washings. Yet, even the best-made habits would, over time, fray at the cuffs, thin at the elbows, and show the inevitable stains and marks of daily labor. Not so with Sister Philippa's habit. From the very beginning, and for decades thereafter, her habit remained in a state that witnesses described as perpetually new. Consider the daily tasks of a medieval nun. Sister Philippa worked in the convent's gardens, tilling the soil, planting seeds, and harvesting vegetables that fed the entire community. This work involved kneeling in damp earth, brushing against thorny bushes, and lifting heavy baskets. Her hands, rough from toil, would undoubtedly brush against her sleeves and skirt. She also assisted in the infirmary, tending to the sick, which often meant exposure to various bodily fluids, and the general messiness of caring for the unwell. When the convent endured the occasional harsh winter, Sister Philippa would be among those gathering firewood, her habit exposed to bark, dust, and the biting wind. Despite all this, according to the convent's annalists, her habit never showed a speck of dirt. Mud would not adhere to the hem, dust seemed to slide away from its surface, even when assisting in the kitchen, where spills of broth or flour were commonplace. Her habit remained pristine. The other nuns, initially bewildered, eventually came to accept it as a singular aspect of Sister Philippa's presence. The novice mistress, Sister Agnes, who had overseen Philippa's early years, often recounted how she would observe Philippa returning from a strenuous afternoon in the fields. Her face perhaps smudged with dirt, but her habit as dark and unblemished as if it had just been taken from the linen press. Sister Agnes, a practical woman, would often try to find a flaw, a thread out of place, a stain, but she never could. The fabric retained its deep, unwavering black hue, never fading, never thinning, never showing signs of years of washing or exposure to the elements. This was not a matter of meticulous cleaning on Sister Philippa's part. All the nuns participated in the communal laundry days, where habits were scrubbed with lye soap in large wooden tubs. Sister Philippa's habit went through the same rigorous process as everyone else's. Yet it emerged from the wash, looking not merely clean, but as if it had never been worn at all, retaining its original structure and freshness. Other nuns would compare their own habits, sometimes only a few years old and already showing considerable wear, to Philippa's, which seemed to defy the passage of time. Visiting dignitaries and bishops who occasionally stayed at the convent also noted this peculiar phenomenon. Bishop Henry, who made an inspection visit in the year 1142, recorded in his personal travelogue, later archived in the diocesan records, a specific observation about Sister Philippa. He mentioned her serene demeanor and her seemingly ageless habit, noting that it looked as new as a novice's, despite Philippa having been in the order for over 30 years by that point. pondered whether it was a sign of divine favor, a symbol of her pure spirit reflected in her outward appearance, or simply an unexplained anomaly. His account did not offer any explanation, only observation. Convent's older sisters, those who had seen decades pass within the cloister walls, often pointed to Sister Philippa's habit as a testament to her unique spiritual grace. They would whisper that her habit was not merely a garment, but an extension of her own unblemished devotion. Younger novices, upon hearing the stories, would often observe Sister Philippa with a mix of awe and curiosity. They would watch her closely as she went about her duties, hoping to catch a glimpse of a stain, a tear, anything that would suggest the habit was subject to the same earthly realities as their own. They never did. Sister Philippa lived a long life, serving the convent faithfully for over 6 decades. When she passed away in 1167, her habit was still as pristine as the day she received it. Convent chronicles recorded her death with a note about her piety and her unblemished habit, a detail that had become an integral part of her story within the community. The garment was carefully preserved, a silent testament to an enduring mystery within the quiet walls of the Benedictine convent. It remained, according to later accounts, a relic of remarkable preservation, still exhibiting its pristine condition long after Sister Philippa's passing, stored within the convent's treasury alongside other venerated items. It was a tangible yet utterly inexplicable sign that seemed to emanate from a life lived in profound simplicity and piety. Number 9. The warmth in the cold of Sister Bridget. In the late 14th century, high in the snow-capped peaks of the Carpathian Mountains, stood the remote convent of Our Lady of Perpetual Snows. Its very name spoke of the harsh realities faced by the nuns who chose to live there. Winters were brutal, often lasting for 6 months, with temperatures plummeting far below freezing and snowdrifts piling higher than the convent walls. Survival depended on rigorous planning, frugal living, and the constant struggle to keep warm. Fuel was scarce gathered from the sparse forests clinging to the lower slopes, and fires in the braziers and hearths were carefully managed to conserve every precious ember. Amidst this relentless cold lived Sister Bridget. She was not a nun of high office or notable lineage, but a simple sister, known for her quiet endurance and her profound, almost childlike, faith. She spent much of her days tending to the infirmary, a cold, drafty stone room where the sick and elderly sisters sought what little warmth could be coaxed from a small, often flickering brazier. In the brutal winter of 1388, the cold was particularly fierce. Snowfall was heavier than anyone could remember, cutting off the convent from the nearest village for weeks on end. Supplies dwindled, and critically, the stored firewood began to run perilously low. The convent chronicler noted the despair in the air, the constant shivering of the nuns, and the rising number of coughs and fevers in the infirmary. It was during this desperate time that an extraordinary occurrence began to manifest around Sister Bridget. The infirmary, despite its high ceilings and cracked windows that let in icy drafts, began to feel different. Other nuns, entering to assist Sister Bridget with her duties or to bring a sick sister, would suddenly notice pockets of warmth, a gentle, pervasive heat that seemed to emanate from no discernible source. At first, they attributed it to a particularly well-stoked fire in the small brazier, but upon inspection, the brazier would often be merely glowing, faintly or sometimes entirely extinguished. Sister Alora, one of the older nuns, afflicted with severe arthritis that made the cold almost unbearable, was moved to the infirmary during this period. She recounted in her personal journal, later discovered among the convent's archives, how she would huddle under her thin blankets, shivering uncontrollably. But when Sister Bridget would approach her bedside, a wave of soothing warmth would envelop her. Sister Elara described it as a warmth not of fire, but of a deep, living heat, almost like sunlight on a summer day, a sensation she had not felt in months. This warmth would remain in the area around her bed for as long as Sister Bridget was near, and even for some time after she moved away, the phenomenon became more pronounced. Sister Bridget's own cell, a small, unheated cubicle even colder than the common areas, began to exhibit the same inexplicable warmth. Other sisters, seeking respite from the biting chill of the dormitory, would occasionally visit Sister Bridget in her cell, ostensibly for conversation or prayer, but secretly hoping to bask in the unusual heat. They would find her peacefully praying or mending garments, and the tiny cell would feel several degrees warmer than the freezing corridor outside. There was no brazier, no warming pan, no hidden source of heat. The warmth seemed to simply exist, emanating from the air itself around Sister Bridget. The abbess, Mother Superior Isolde, a woman known for her pragmatism and sharp intellect, was initially skeptical. She sent nuns to investigate, to search for any hidden heat sources, any explanation for the peculiar warmth. They checked the walls for drafts, the floor for cracks, the windows for proper sealing. They found nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, the warmth persisted, particularly strong around Sister Bridget. Mother Isolde herself visited the infirmary on several occasions, her breath steaming in the frigid air, only to feel the strange, comforting heat as she approached Sister Bridget's station. She noted in the chapter records that the warmth brought palpable relief to the sick and was a comfort to all who experienced it. Convent's limited fuel supply, which should have been exhausted weeks prior, seemed to last longer than calculable a detail recorded in the convent's daily log. While the nuns continued to ration and conserve, the desperate need for constant roaring fires diminished due to the localized mysterious warmth. The number of new illnesses in the infirmary, which had been steadily climbing, began to level off and even decline. The sick sisters reported feeling better, not just from the warmth, but a general sense of comfort and healing. This inexplicable warmth, attributed to Sister Bridget's deep piety and her unwavering devotion, became a topic of quiet reverence within the convent. It was seen as a divine intervention, a merciful gift to alleviate the suffering of the community during a desperate winter. Sister Bridget herself remained humble and unassuming, never drawing attention to the phenomenon, simply continuing her duties with a serene disposition. The warmth, according to the convent's annual reports to the local bishop, persisted through the worst of that winter, diminishing only as the spring thaws finally arrived. Convent chronicler, a year later, reflected on that winter, stating that the warmth had not merely kept them from freezing, but had infused the very spirit of the convent with hope and a profound sense of being watched over. Number 8. The Speaking Crucifix of Sister Scholastica. In a secluded valley, far from the bustling trade routes and noisy towns of 12th century Bavaria, stood a small, unassuming convent dedicated to St. Anne. Its walls, constructed of rough-hewn stone, housed a community of contemplative nuns, their lives governed by prayer, silence, and diligent manual labor. Among them was Sister Scholastica, a nun who had joined the order in her early 20s, known for her intense piety and her preference for solitary prayer. She spent countless hours in her small, sparsely furnished cell, kneeling before a simple wooden crucifix. It was a common, unadorned piece, carved by a local craftsman, depicting Christ in a posture of suffering. The events that would forever mark Sister Scholastica's story began in the spring of 1135. For several weeks, Sister Scholastica had been troubled by a series of profound spiritual doubts. She felt a growing sense of despair, but disconnect from the divine presence she had once felt so keenly. Her prayers seemed to echo in an empty void, and her heart, she confided to her confessor, Father Gregor, felt heavy and burdened. Father Gregor, whose notes on the spiritual struggles of the nuns were meticulously kept and later reviewed by the diocesan authorities, recorded Scholastica's anguish and his attempts to offer solace through traditional spiritual guidance. One afternoon, as Sister Scholastica knelt before her crucifix, her mind overwhelmed by her inner turmoil, she heard a voice. It was not a voice from within her own thoughts, nor the voice of a fellow nun outside her cell. It was a voice that seemed to emanate directly from the wooden figure of Christ on the cross. The voice was clear, resonant, and filled with a profound, gentle authority. It spoke words of comfort, reassurance, and instruction. Sister Scholastica at first was stunned into silence, questioning her own sanity, wondering if her spiritual distress had finally manifested in delusion. She closed her eyes, then opened them again. The voice continued, offering specific words of encouragement, reminding her of divine mercy and enduring love. Her immediate reaction, as recorded in Father Gregor's notes, was fear. She stood up, her heart pounding, and retreated to the far corner of her cell. Yet the voice, though gentle, did not cease. It called her back, urging her to listen, to trust. Slowly, hesitantly, Sister Scholastica returned to her knees before the crucifix. As she listened, the fear began to recede, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace and clarity. The voice addressed her doubts directly, dismantling them with tender yet firm theological reasoning, and offering a perspective that seemed to transcend her human understanding. The next day, Sister Scholastica, still reeling from the experience, approached her confessor. She recounted the event in detail, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Father Gregor, a seasoned priest familiar with the stories of saints and visions, listened intently. He advised her to remain cautious, to pray for discernment, and to seek further confirmation. He urged her to invite another nun to be present in her cell the next time she felt the presence of the voice, to act as a witness. A few days later, Sister Scholastica invited Sister Gertrude, an older, respected nun known for her quiet wisdom, to join her in her cell for prayer. As the two nuns knelt in silence, Sister Gertrude, too, heard the voice emanating from the crucifix. Her initial reaction, as she later attested to Father Gregor and the abbess, Mother Beatrix, was one of profound shock. The voice was distinct, clear, and seemed to fill the small room. It spoke of theological truths, offered guidance to Sister Scholastica, and even at one point addressed Sister Gertrude directly, offering her a blessing for her own long years of service. News of the speaking crucifix quickly spread through the convent, though in hushed tones, as befitted the sanctity and solemnity of such an alleged miracle. The abbess Mother Beatrix, a woman of deep faith but also practical judgment, decided to observe the phenomenon herself. Accompanied by Father Gregor, she entered Sister Scholastica's cell. All three knelt before the crucifix. After a period of silent prayer, the voice began to speak again. Mother Beatrix later reported to the local bishop in a letter that has been preserved in the diocesan archives that the voice was unmistakable. It spoke with a wisdom and authority that transcended human understanding, offering prophecies about the convent's future and providing spiritual counsel that resonated deeply with all present. This phenomenon did not occur daily, but rather intermittently, usually when Sister Scholastica was in a state of intense prayer or spiritual need. Each instance was meticulously recorded by Father Gregor and Mother Beatrix, detailing the date, the witnesses, and the exact words spoken by the crucifix. The records indicated that the voice always spoke in clear, eloquent Latin. The liturgical language of the time and its pronouncements were always consistent with orthodox theological teaching. The speaking crucifix of Sister Scholastica became a point of pilgrimage within the immediate region. Though the convent remained secluded, rumors of the miracle drew a few select visitors, pious laypeople, other clergy, and even on one occasion, a representative from the bishop's office. They would kneel in Sister Scholastica's cell, and sometimes the voice would speak, offering general blessings or words of spiritual encouragement. Always, it was said, profound and moving. Sister Scholastica herself remained humble and devout, never claiming the voice as her own doing, but always attributing it to divine grace. Crucifix, though still appearing as a simple wooden carving, was now regarded as a sacred object, a tangible link to something beyond the earthly realm. The records from the period indicate that the experience brought a profound sense of peace and renewed faith to Sister Scholastica and to the entire convent community, strengthening their resolve in their contemplative lives and confirming for them a direct, audible connection to the divine. Number 7. The unbreakable thread of Sister Juliana. In the bustling city of Bruges, a prominent center of medieval textile production during the 13th century, stood the convent of St. Clare. This convent was particularly renowned for its exquisite needlework. Its nuns, producing stunning altar cloths, priestly vestments, and delicate tapestries that adorned cathedrals and noble homes across the Low Countries. The skill of the sisters was legendary, their fingers nimble and their eyes keen, working with the finest silks, gold thread, and wool. Among these gifted artisans was Sister Juliana, a young nun who possessed an extraordinary talent for weaving and embroidery. She was known for her dedication, often working long hours by candlelight to complete intricate designs. In the year 1278, the convent received a commission of unprecedented scale. A powerful duke, seeking to commemorate a significant victory and to adorn his newly constructed chapel, requested an immense tapestry depicting scenes from the life of St. Francis of Assisi. Tapestry was to be vast, covering an entire wall, and so intricate that it would take years to complete, even with the collective effort of many nuns. The Abbess Mother Celeste accepted the commission, recognizing its spiritual and financial importance for the convent. Sister Juliana was assigned a leading role in the project, tasked with weaving a particularly complex section that would serve as the central narrative panel. The challenge was not only the size and complexity, but also the sheer volume of materials required. The finest wool and silk threads, dyed in vibrant hues, were procured from the bustling markets of Bruges. However, even with the best planning, it was known that a project of this magnitude would consume an immense amount of thread, requiring constant replenishment and careful management of supplies. Sister Juliana began her work with customary diligence. She selected a spool of a particular shade of deep forest green silk, intended for the intricate foliage of the tapestry's landscape. As she wove her shuttle, flying back and forth, the thread unwound steadily. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The tapestry grew under her skilled hands, the forest scene taking shape with astonishing detail, but a peculiar thing began to happen. The spool of green silk thread, which should have been depleted long ago, seemed never to diminish. Sister Clotilde, who worked alongside Juliana and was responsible for managing the thread inventory, first noticed the anomaly. She would mark the spools, keeping careful records of their usage. She observed that Sister Juliana's spool of green silk, despite hours of continuous weaving, remained full. Sister Clotilde, a meticulous and practical woman, initially thought she must have made a mistake in her inventory. She weighed the spool, measured its length, and compared it to new spools. Everything indicated it was a standard, finite spool of thread, yet it continued to yield an endless supply. The phenomenon was not subtle. The central panel of the tapestry required an enormous amount of this specific green. Other nuns weaving different sections were constantly calling for new spools of their colors, which were replaced from the dwindling stores. But Sister Juliana never requested a new spool of green. Her original spool, resting in its holder, appeared to remain unchanged, as if it were a bottomless source. Other nuns, working in proximity to Sister Juliana, began to observe this directly. They would watch as she pulled thread from the spool, stitch after stitch, hour after hour. They would glance at the spool, expecting to see it shrink only to find it seemingly untouched. Sister Agatha, an elderly nun who had spent her entire life working with textiles, attested in a deposition to the local bishop's representative, whose visit was recorded in the convent's annual report, that she had never witnessed such a thing in all her years. She stated that it defied the natural laws of thread consumption. The abbess, Mother Celeste, when informed of the persistent reports, came to observe Sister Juliana herself. She sat silently watching the rhythmic motion of Juliana's hands and the unwavering appearance of the spool. Mother Celeste, as recorded in the convent's chapter minutes, acknowledged the inexplicable nature of the phenomenon. She did not offer an explanation, but rather instructed the nuns to record the event precisely, detailing the amount of tapestry completed using that single spool. The records show that the central panel, a piece that would have required many pounds of silk thread, was completed entirely with this one spool, which still appeared full at the end of the project. This miracle of the unbreakable thread alleviated a significant burden on the convent. It not only saved countless hours of rethreading and managing supplies, but also conserved precious resources, allowing the convent to direct its limited funds to other necessities. The finished tapestry was a masterpiece, renowned for its intricate details and vibrant colors, and especially for the astonishingly rich and consistent green of its central panel. Sister Juliana herself remained humble throughout, attributing the phenomenon not to her own skill, but to divine providence. She believed it was a sign of heaven's blessing on their work, a testament to the sacred nature of their artistic labor for the glory of God. The spool of green thread, though its endless supply was now no longer needed for the grand tapestry, was carefully preserved in the convent's treasury. It became a symbol of the convent's extraordinary history and the seemingly limitless grace that could manifest even in the mundane tasks of daily life, defying the ordinary rules of consumption and material depletion, a story that continued to be told within the order for centuries. Number 6. The Weightless Steps of Mother Superior Helena. In the year 987, amidst the tumultuous landscape of early medieval Germany, the formidable Abbey of St. Walburga stood as a beacon of stability and spiritual devotion. Founded centuries earlier, it was a large and influential institution, housing hundreds of nuns and novices, cultivating vast agricultural lands, and serving as a center of learning. At its head was Mother Superior Helena, a woman of noble birth who had embraced the monastic life with fierce dedication. She was known for her strict adherence to the rule of Saint Benedict, her profound spiritual discipline, and her unwavering leadership during a period of frequent local conflicts and changing political allegiances. The abbey had a long tradition of solemn processions, particularly on major feast days. These processions would wind through the abbey's cloisters, the church nave, and sometimes even the extensive grounds. The nuns carrying banners, relics, and illuminated manuscripts, chanting hymns in unison. These events were public, often attended by local nobility, clergy, and pious common folk who sought spiritual upliftment. It was during one such procession, on the Feast of the Assumption, in the year 998, that an extraordinary event involving Mother Superior Helena was observed by a multitude of witnesses. The procession was particularly grand that year, celebrating a newly consecrated altar. Mother Superior Helena led the procession, carrying a heavy, silver-bound reliquary containing a fragment of a saint's bone. The reliquary was known to be substantial, its weight requiring significant effort to carry, especially over a long distance. As the procession moved through the main cloister, a section paved with ancient, uneven flagstones, several onlookers later recounted seeing something remarkable. According to the Abbey's meticulous chronicles, which served as a detailed historical record of the institution, and the testimonies of numerous eyewitnesses compiled by a visiting papal legate, Bishop Adalbert, Mother Superior Helena's feet seemed to lift from the ground. Not dramatically, not like a sudden ascent, but subtly, gracefully, as if she were walking on air, her weight somehow removed from the earth. Bishop Adalbert, whose official report to Rome is preserved in Vatican archives, stated that he observed with his own eyes how her sandaled feet, though moving in a walking motion, did not make contact with the stone floor. They hovered inches above the surface, her progress smooth and effortless. Sister Gisela, a novice walking directly behind Mother Superior Helena, recorded in her diary, which became part of the Abbey's spiritual library, her astonishment. She wrote that she could see the space between Mother Superior Helena's soles and the worn stones clear and unmistakable. Other nuns, positioned along the route of the procession, strained to see, and many confirmed the observation. They described her movement as extraordinarily light, almost ethereal, as if she were gliding rather than walking. The heavy reliquary she carried seemed to offer no resistance, her posture perfectly erect, her face serene in prayer. The phenomenon was not fleeting. It reportedly continued for the entire duration of the procession, which lasted for nearly an hour. As Mother Superior Helena led the chanting nuns, her feet remained suspended, never touching the ground. When the procession concluded and she reached the altar, she gently lowered the reliquary, and her feet settled back onto the stone floor with a soft, almost imperceptible contact. The witnesses, a mix of nuns, local villagers, and visiting clergy and nobility, reacted with a profound mixture of awe and reverence. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. Some fell to their knees, believing they had witnessed a profound sign of divine grace. Others simply stared, unable to reconcile what they had seen with their understanding of the physical world. The event, according to the Abbey chronicles, left an indelible mark on the community, strengthening the faith of many and elevating Mother Superior Helena to an even greater status of sanctity in their eyes. Bishop Adalbert, in his report, meticulously documented the various testimonies, noting the consistency of the accounts, despite the different vantage points of the observers. He did not offer a theological interpretation or an explanation for the event, but simply presented it as a factual observation, an event that defied the known laws of gravity. He concluded that it was an event of undeniable spiritual significance. Mother Superior Helena herself, when questioned later, remained humble and reticent. She reportedly said little about the experience, only that she felt an overwhelming lightness and a profound closeness to the divine during the procession. She attributed any such occurrence to the grace of God and not to her own merits. She continued her duties as abbess with her usual diligence and piety until her death many years later. The story of her weightless steps became a foundational narrative within the Abbey of St. Walburga, recounted to generations of novices and cited as a powerful example of the miraculous manifestations of holiness in the medieval period, a true and documented account that defied rational explanation. Number 5. The Unseen Hand of Sister Thérèse. In the mid-14th century, the venerable Abbey of Saint Claire in Provence, France, embarked on an ambitious project. The Great Rood Screen, a monumental carved wooden partition separating the monastic choir from the nave of the church, had suffered irreparable damage during a sudden and violent storm. It was a cherished piece, intricate and finely detailed, a testament to centuries of monastic craftsmanship. Rebuilding it was a monumental undertaking, requiring not only considerable financial resources but also the skilled hands of master carvers. The abbess Mother Jean hired the most reputable woodworkers from the nearby city of Avignon, then a center of artistic innovation. The work progressed steadily for many months, but as the winter approached, an unforeseen challenge arose. The master carver, a man named Jean-Pierre, fell gravely ill. His illness rendered him unable to work, and his apprentices, while competent, lacked the particular skill and artistic vision required for the final, most intricate part of the rood screen. The central figure of Christ on the cross, surrounded by angels, a piece that demanded delicate and detailed relief work. Timeline for completion was imperiled, and the cost of extending the project was immense. Despair began to settle over the abbey. Among the nuns was Sister Thérèse, a quiet, unassuming woman known for her deep, contemplative prayer life. She was not a wood carver, nor an artist of any sort, her duties primarily lying in the library, transcribing manuscripts. Yet she possessed an unwavering faith and a profound empathy for the struggles of her community. Hearing of the master carver's illness and the looming delay, Sister Therese went to her cell, knelt before her simple crucifix, and began to pray. She prayed not for the master carver's recovery, though she did so, but for the completion of the sacred work, that the rood screen might be finished to the glory of God. The next morning, the abbess Mother Jean, accompanied by Sister Genevieve, the sacristan, and a few other sisters, went to the workshop to assess the situation. They expected to find the unfinished central panel, perhaps with a few tentative amateurish attempts by the apprentices. What they discovered instead left them speechless. According to the Abbey's official chronicles, a handwritten record maintained by the successive abbesses and accounts later corroborated by Jean-Pierre's apprentices and a visiting bishop, the central panel of the rood screen was not merely worked on but perfectly completed. The figure of Christ, the intricate folds of his drapery, the delicate features of the angels, the fine details of their wings, all were carved with a precision and artistry that surpassed even the master carver's previous work. The wood shavings lay on the floor, indicating recent activity, but no one had seen or heard anyone working during the night. The workshop had been locked, the keys kept by the sacristan. Jean-Pierre's apprentices, young men named Antoine and Louis, arrived later that morning. Expecting to continue their laborious and imperfect attempts, they gasped when they saw the finished carving. They touched it, examined it from every angle, and declared that such a level of detail and perfection could not have been achieved by human hands in a single night, certainly not by their own, nor by their ailing master. They confirmed that the tools had been left precisely where they had been the previous evening, and that the workshop door had remained secured. Mother Jean, a woman of practical faith, immediately called for Sister Therese. Sister Therese, with her usual humility, confirmed that she had spent the night in prayer for the completion of the rood screen. She had felt a profound sense of peace as she prayed, a conviction that the work would be done. She knew nothing more. The Abbey's chronicles detail that this was not a one-time occurrence. A few days later, another complex section of the screen, a frieze depicting saints which had been set aside due to its difficulty, was also found completed overnight. Again the workshop was locked, the tools untouched, save for the telltale presence of fresh wood shavings. On yet another occasion, a missing, intricate piece of tracery, critical for the screen's stability and beauty, appeared perfectly carved and placed in its designated spot, seemingly from thin air. Word of these inexplicable occurrences reached the local bishop who, skeptical but curious, dispatched a team to investigate. The team, led by a learned scholar and a master builder, meticulously examined the workshop, the completed carvings, and interviewed all the nuns and workmen. Their report, preserved in the diocesan archives, concluded that there was no human explanation for the completion of such complex, time-consuming, and artistically superior carvings, in the absence of workmen and without any signs of forced entry or unusual activity. They noted the consistent testimony regarding Sister Therese's persistent prayer during these times. The rood screen was completed within its original time frame, surpassing all expectations in its beauty and intricacy. It stood as a magnificent testament to the Abbey's faith, and for many, to the direct intervention of a divine unseen hand, moved by the simple, earnest prayers of Sister Therese. The Abbey's records, years later, referred to the rood screen not merely as a work of human art, but as a miracle in wood, forever linked to the silent, unseen efforts that seemingly brought it to fruition. Sister Therese, throughout her life, remained a figure of quiet reverence, her humility deepening with each passing year. Her story a powerful reminder that profound spiritual power could manifest in the most unexpected and unseen ways. Number 4. The Living Vine of Sister Hildegard. In the picturesque Rhine Valley of 12th century Germany, perched upon a verdant hillside, lay the convent of Rupertsberg. It was a place of learning and contemplation, renowned for its illuminated manuscripts and its extensive gardens, which provided sustenance and beauty for the community. Among the nuns lived Sister Hildegard, a woman whose name, while not that of the famous visionary abbess, was nonetheless etched into the convent's local annals for a singular botanical marvel. Sister Hildegard was known for her particular affinity for the natural world, spending hours tending to the convent's herbs, fruits, and vegetables, her hands seemingly coaxing life from the soil. The year 1148 brought an unprecedented hardship to the Rhine region. A prolonged and unseasonable drought gripped the land, followed by a sudden, devastating late spring frost. Crops withered, the fruit trees failed to blossom, and the grapevines, crucial for the convent's sacramental wine and its livelihood, turned brittle and brown. The convent's chronicles, which served as a record of both spiritual and material well-being, noted the growing despair among the nuns as their stores dwindled and the prospect of a barren harvest loomed. The vines in particular looked utterly lifeless. Their wood, dry and cracked, their tendrils shriveled. It was clear that the year's vintage, and possibly future vintages, were entirely lost. Sister Hildegard, witnessing the desolation in the vineyard, felt a deep pang of sorrow. She understood the severity of the situation for her community. For days she spent her time in the vineyard, walking among the dying vines, her heart heavy. One afternoon she knelt before an old gnarled grapevine, one that had been particularly prolific in previous years but now appeared utterly dead, its branches like skeletal fingers reaching into the parched air. She began to pray. Her prayer not a formal recitation but a heartfelt plea, tears streaming down her face as she touched the dry, lifeless wood. What happened next was recounted by Sister Johanna, the convent's gardener, who was tending to a small patch of resilient herbs nearby, and later by a visiting merchant, Herr Klaus, who was negotiating the delivery of emergency grain and happened to be walking through the lower part of the vineyard. As Sister Hildegard's hands rested on the dead vine, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through its branches. Then, before the eyes of the astonished witnesses, a tiny, vibrant green shoot unfurled from one of the withered nodes. This single shoot grew with astonishing speed. Within minutes, it elongated, twisting around a nearby support. Small, tightly furled leaves began to sprout along its length, rapidly unfolding into their characteristic shape. As Sister Johanna and Herr Klaus watched in utter disbelief, small flower buds emerged from the leaf axils, swelling and bursting into delicate, fragrant blossoms. The air around the vine, which had been dry and still, suddenly carried a faint, sweet scent, a perfume of fresh bloom. The miracle did not stop there. The blossoms swiftly matured into tiny green berries, which then began to swell and darken, taking on the rich purple hue of ripe grapes. All of this unfolded in less than an hour, a process that normally took months. By the time the abbess, Mother Ursula, was summoned to the vineyard, the single vine Sister Hildegard had touched stood laden with plump, juicy bunches of fully ripe grapes, glistening in the afternoon sun. The rest of the vineyard remained a desolate, withered expanse. The grapes from this single vine were harvested immediately. Quantity, while not enough to sustain the entire convent indefinitely, was nonetheless remarkable for one vine. More importantly, the juice pressed from these grapes was said to be extraordinarily sweet and potent, capable of producing the finest sacramental wine the convent had ever known. A small quantity was preserved in a special cask, revered as a direct blessing. News of the living vine spread quickly through the region. Local farmers, desperate for a sign of hope, came to see the vine for themselves. Many brought their own withered branches, hoping for a similar blessing. While the other vines in the convent's vineyard eventually recovered with the return of the rains, none showed the instantaneous, miraculous revival of Sister Hildegard's vine. Convents chronicles, later supported by the merchant's testimony, presented to the local count and recorded in his court records, documented the event with awe. They stated that the vine continued to thrive for many years, yielding an unusually abundant harvest each season, long after the other vines had resumed their normal, less prolific production. Became a living testament to the power of unwavering faith and the boundless generosity of divine providence, a unique botanical marvel that defied the usual cycles of nature brought forth by the quiet, heartfelt prayer of Sister Hildegard amidst profound despair. Number 3. The luminous veil of Abbess Benedicta. The Abbey of St. Augustine, nestled in a serene valley of central England, was a place of deep spirituality and renowned scholarship in the early 11th century. It was led by Abbess Benedicta, a woman of profound piety and exceptional leadership. She governed her community with wisdom and compassion, her life a constant example of devotion and service. The abbey itself was a large establishment, home to over 100 nuns, and it served as a beacon of learning and hospitality in the region. In the winter of 1032, a severe illness swept through the abbey. A virulent fever, accompanied by a racking cough, afflicted many of the sisters. The infirmary overflowed, and the convent's limited remedies and the tireless efforts of the infirmarian, Sister Martha, seemed insufficient against the rapid spread of the disease. Among the hardest hit was Sister Eleanor, a young nun beloved by all for her gentle nature and joyful spirit. She succumbed to the fever's worst symptoms, her breathing shallow, her body burning with fever, and her cough growing increasingly weak. The infirmarian had given up hope, preparing the last rites, believing Sister Eleanor would not survive the night. Abbess Benedicta, deeply distressed by the suffering of her community and particularly by Sister Eleanor's desperate state, retired to the abbey church in the late hours of the night. She knelt before the high altar, her personal prayer veil, a simple piece of white linen, covering her head and shoulders. She prayed with an intensity that seemed to transcend the physical world, her plea not just for Sister Eleanor, but for all her afflicted sisters, for the health and well-being of the entire community. According to the Abbey's official chronicles, a detailed history compiled by the abbess and confirmed by the testimony of Sister Martha and several other nuns who were present in the infirmary, an extraordinary light began to emanate from Abbess Benedicta. As she continued her silent prayer, her white veil began to glow with a soft, ethereal radiance. It was not the harsh glare of a torch or the flickering light of a candle, but a warm, gentle luminescence seeming to come from within the fabric itself. The light expanded, filling the space around her with a comforting, otherworldly glow that pulsed gently with her breath. Sister Martha, exhausted and on the verge of tears in the infirmary, had instinctively sought solace in the nearby church. As she entered, she witnessed the luminous phenomenon. She stood frozen, awestruck by the sight. The light, she later recounted to the abbess, was both beautiful and profoundly peaceful, unlike anything she had ever seen. Compelled by an inexplicable urge, Sister Martha slowly approached the glowing abbess. As she drew near, she felt a wave of warmth, a palpable sensation of healing energy emanating from the luminous veil. Without conscious thought, Sister Martha reached out a trembling hand and gently touched the glowing fabric. A jolt, not of pain, but of pure, restorative energy, passed through her. Then, moved by a profound conviction, she carefully detached a small corner of the veil from Abbess Benedicta's shoulder, a piece no larger than her thumbnail, and rushed back to Sister Eleanor's bedside in the infirmary. Sister Eleanor was barely breathing. Her skin was feverish, her eyes sunken. Sister Martha, with a silent prayer of her own, gently laid the small glowing piece of the veil onto Sister Eleanor's forehead. The moment the veil touched her skin, the young nun gasped. A soft light, mirroring the glow of the veil, seemed to briefly pulse around Sister Eleanor's face. Within moments, the fever broke. Sister Eleanor's breathing became steady and deep, the racking cough subsided. By dawn, she was awake, her fever gone, her strength remarkably restored, asking for food, she recounted, feeling a sudden inexplicable sense of coolness and relief when the veil touched her. News of Sister Eleanor's miraculous recovery and the luminous veil of Abbess Benedicta spread rapidly throughout the abbey. The other sick nuns, hearing the incredible tale, pleaded for the same blessing. Abbess Benedicta, upon learning of Sister Eleanor's recovery, returned to the infirmary. She laid her still glowing veil over each of the sick sisters, one by one. In every instance, the fever subsided, the coughs quieted, and a noticeable improvement in their condition was observed. Within days, the abbey was free from the grips of the fever, the nuns restored to health. The abbey's chronicle recorded the events with immense reverence, describing the luminous veil as a divine instrument, a direct manifestation of divine mercy brought forth by the abbess's fervent prayer. The small piece of the veil that touched Sister Eleanor was carefully preserved as a sacred relic, its faint glow reportedly discernible for many years. Abbess Benedicta continued to wear her veil, now imbued with a sacred aura, a constant reminder of the extraordinary grace that had delivered her community from the grip of sickness. The event cemented her legacy not only as a wise leader, but as a saintly figure through whom profound healing had manifested, a story recounted to generations of nuns who followed in her footsteps. Within the venerable walls of St. Augustine's, Number 2. The unfolding scroll of Sister Mechthild. In the tranquil, contemplative priory of St. Elizabeth, nestled in the quiet valleys of 13th-century Saxony, lived Sister Mechthild. This priory was renowned for its scribble workshop, where nuns meticulously copied and illuminated sacred texts. Sister Mechthild herself was not a scribe by primary duty, but a nun known for her profound spiritual experiences, her deep immersion in prayer, and her quiet, introspective nature. She spent countless hours in silent meditation, often in the scriptorium solitude, surrounded by blank parchment and the tools of illumination. In the year 1255, a period of increasing local unrest and spiritual uncertainty, Sister Mechthild began to experience intense visions. These were not the fleeting images of dreams, but vivid, profound experiences during her waking hours, often accompanied by a sense of divine presence. She attempted to describe these visions to her abbess, Mother Hildegard, and her confessor, Father Anselm, but found it difficult to translate the complexity of divine insight into human language. The visions included intricate symbolic imagery, theological concepts, and glimpses of future events, both local and general. One afternoon, while Sister Mechthild was in a state of deep prayer in her cell, she felt an overwhelming compulsion to retrieve a blank parchment scroll from the scriptorium. It was a fresh, unblemished piece of vellum, prepared and smoothed, awaiting the scribe's ink. She brought it back to her cell and laid it on her simple wooden table. As she knelt before it, she closed her eyes, resuming her prayer. According to the priory's meticulously kept chronicles, a detailed record of significant events and spiritual occurrences, and the later testimony of Mother Hildegard and Father Anselm, an extraordinary phenomenon began to unfold on the blank parchment. As Sister Mechthild prayed, faint lines of script began to appear on the vellum. At first, they were barely visible, like impressions from a distant pen, but gradually they darkened, becoming clear and legible. These were not simple sentences, but complex theological treatises, poetic verses, and detailed prophetic insights. The script was of an exquisite, consistent hand, more beautiful than any human scribe could produce, and it unfurled itself across the parchment without any visible pen or ink. After the script, vibrant, intricate illuminations began to appear. Gold leaf seemed to materialize onto the vellum, forming shimmering borders and intricate initial letters. Colors, rich and deep, flowed onto the page, depicting symbolic scenes and allegories related to the text. Parchment, once blank, was slowly, mysteriously filling itself. Sister Clara, a young novice who often brought Sister Mechthild her meals, discovered the phenomenon by accident. She entered the cell to find Sister Mechthild still deep in prayer, seemingly unaware of the miraculous transformation happening on her table. Sister Clara gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief, as she watched a delicate blue pigment seep into the outlines of a newly formed illustration. She immediately ran to summon Mother Hildegard and Father Anselm. They arrived to find the scroll continuing its silent, supernatural creation. Mother Hildegard, a woman of deep learning and spiritual discernment, examined the text. It was in flawless Latin, the language of the Church, and contained theological insights that were both profound and entirely orthodox. Father Anselm, a scholar of Scripture, recognized passages and interpretations that seemed to transcend human understanding, yet were rooted in divine truth. They both noted the exquisite artistry of the illuminations, which seemed to glow with an inner light. The process of the scroll's unfolding continued for several days. Each morning, Mother Hildegard and Father Anselm would visit Sister Mechthild's cell, and each time more of the parchment would be filled with text and illumination. Content ranged from deeply personal spiritual guidance for Sister Mechthild to broad prophetic warnings for the Church and the world regarding future periods of trial and spiritual renewal. One particular section contained a detailed prophecy about a major local famine and a subsequent political upheaval, which, according to the priory's later records, came to pass with startling accuracy within the following decade. The scroll eventually filled completely, a testament to what many believed was a direct, ongoing revelation from heaven. Sister Mechthild herself remained humble throughout, insisting that she was merely a vessel for the divine will. She never claimed authorship or personal merit for the scroll's contents, but rather attributed its creation entirely to a miraculous intervention. The unfolding scroll of Sister Mechthild became the priory's most treasured possession. It was carefully bound and housed in a special reliquary, consulted for spiritual guidance, and as a profound source of inspiration. Copies were made of its prophecies and theological insights, which circulated among select monastic communities and learned clergy. Priory's records confirmed the accuracy of its predictions, reinforcing the belief in its divine origin. The scroll remained a powerful symbol of an astounding spiritual phenomenon, a direct communication from the divine realm, channeled through the prayer and quiet devotion of Sister Mechthild, forever altering the understanding of revelation within the priory's walls. Number 1. The Whispering Loaf of St. Agnes Convent. In a remote corner of northern Spain, nestled in the rugged Pyrenees Mountains, stood the small, austere convent of St. Agnes. Founded in the late 10th century, it was a community of sisters living a life of strict poverty and prayer, often facing the harsh realities of isolation and challenging weather. Their existence was simple, sustained by their small agricultural efforts and occasional alms from nearby villages. In the winter of 1066, a particularly brutal and prolonged cold snap gripped the region. Snow fell incessantly, trapping the convent in drifts taller than its walls, cutting off all routes to the outside world. The ground froze solid, making any foraging impossible. Convent's meager stores of dried grain, cured meat, and root vegetables began to dwindle at an alarming rate. Within weeks, the nuns faced the grim prospect of starvation. Convent chronicler, whose entries were terse and factual, recorded the increasing hunger and weakness among the sisters, noting the growing fear in the community. The abbess Mother Isabel, a strong and pious woman, encouraged constant prayer, but her own face reflected the deep worry that gnawed at her. One morning, the storeroom, which held the last remaining supplies, was found almost empty. Only a single small round loaf of coarse, dark bread remained on a shelf, baked days earlier. It was barely enough for a single meal for one nun, let alone the dozens of sisters who composed the community. Despair threatened to engulf the convent. Sister Adela, the young nun tasked with distributing the meager rations, picked up the loaf, her heart heavy. She brought it to the refectory, where the hungry nuns gathered for their morning prayers, their stomachs aching with emptiness. As Sister Adela placed the small loaf on the communal table before Mother Isabel, a peculiar sensation permeated the room. A faint, warm aroma, unlike anything previously encountered, wafted from the bread. It was the scent of freshly baked bread, rich and comforting, even though the loaf was old and cold. Then a low, almost imperceptible sound emanated from the loaf. It was a whispering sound, soft and gentle but distinct. As the nuns strained to hear, they realized the whispers were in Latin, uttering faint prayers and phrases of comfort, such as, "Fear not, for I am with you, and I am the bread of life." The abbess, Mother Isabel, reached out and touched the loaf. It was warm to the touch, despite the freezing air of the refectory. She instructed Sister Adela to cut the loaf. Sister Adela, using the bread knife, made the first cut. As she did, she felt no resistance. The knife sliced through the loaf, and as she drew the pieces apart, more bread seemed to materialize. She cut a second slice, and then a third, and a fourth. Each time, the loaf seemed to replenish itself, never diminishing in size, always remaining whole, even as pieces were taken from it. The nuns watched in stunned silence, their hunger forgotten for a moment. Mother Isabel, with a newfound light in her eyes, instructed Sister Adela to distribute a generous portion to each nun. Each sister received a full serving of warm, fragrant bread, and still the original small loaf on the table remained intact, its form unchanging, its faint whispers of prayer continuing. This extraordinary phenomenon persisted for the entire duration of the siege of winter. Every meal, morning, noon, and evening, Sister Adela would cut slices from the single loaf and it would miraculously replenish itself. The bread was always fresh, always warm, and always carried the faint, comforting aroma and the gentle whispers. It sustained the entire community, providing not just physical nourishment, but profound spiritual solace in a time of extreme hardship. Chronicles' daily entries shifted from despair to wonder, meticulously recording the miracle. Word of the whispering loaf eventually reached the outside world when a scouting party from a nearby village managed to break through the snowdrifts to check on the convent. The villagers themselves, struggling with hunger, were astonished to find the nuns healthy and full of vigor, attributing it to a direct, divine intervention. They were shown the loaf, still resting on the refectory table, still warm, still whispering. The village priest, Father Matteo, later attested to the local bishop in a written report, preserved in diocesan archives, that he witnessed the loaf being cut and that it miraculously replenished itself before his eyes. He also confirmed the faint, melodic whispers emanating from it. Convent, according to later accounts, preserved the small original loaf in a special reliquary after the winter finally broke and normal supplies could be resumed. No longer provided endless sustenance, but it reportedly retained its inexplicable warmth and emitted a faint, comforting aroma for many years, a powerful relic of the miraculous winter. The event became a foundational story for the convent of St. Agnes, passed down through generations of nuns, a vivid and undeniable testament to a profound act of divine providence that sustained them through an impossible time, all initiated by the humble, unwavering faith, that inexhaustible source of life.